The room fell silent. Every eye in the courtroom locked on Jasmine Crockett, mid-sentence, her words hanging in the air like a living thing. The jury's pens paused mid-note. The stenographer's fingers froze above the keys, and even the spectators in the back row seemed suspended between disbelief and awe. No one moved. It was as if time itself had been held hostage by the sheer force of what was being said. No one expected this from her, not the jury, not the audience, and certainly not Judge Richard Leon. The thought ricocheted through the minds of everyone present. A courtroom that had been brimming with predictable tension now vibrated with a strange electric energy. The power dynamic had shifted imperceptibly but irrevocably. The man known for his unshakable authority, his reputation, carved from years of stern gavelled judgments, sat leaning slightly forward, eyes narrowing, trying to decode the source of this unexpected force. Whispers tried to ripple through the gallery, but even they seemed to falter in the weight of the moment. Spectators who had once doubted her paused, questioning the assumptions they had carried in quietly judging her capability. There was a subtle tremor in the air, a collective sense that history was unfolding in that very chamber, and that anyone witnessing it would remember it for the rest of their lives. The opposing counsel's face, previously a mask of smug confidence, tightened imperceptibly. He had come prepared to dominate, to unsettle, to humiliate, but none of his carefully calibrated moves landed. Instead, each interruption, each raised eyebrow, each cutting remark met a calm, unshakable presence. Crockett's voice carried clarity, precision, and a quiet authority that contradicted every expectation anyone had about who held control in this room. The shift was subtle but undeniable. The courtroom, once a stage for predictable legal theater, had become a battleground where dignity and truth were quietly but powerfully asserting themselves. The audience, the jury, even the judge, all were being drawn into the gravity of what was unfolding, and yet, for all the awe and tension, none of it could explain why her words landed with such devastating clarity. None of it could capture the storm that was building beneath her composed exterior. But to understand why her words hit like thunder, we need to rewind. The courtroom was a pressure cooker of anticipation. Cameras lined the back walls, their lenses trained like hawks. On every movement, every gesture, every subtle shift in expression, the case had drawn national attention. Headlines splashed across morning papers and news websites, a high-profile legal battle that promised fireworks. Every spectator, from seasoned reporters to curious onlookers, carried an unspoken question. Could anyone possibly shift the balance in a courtroom dominated by experience and authority? At the center of it all sat Judge Richard Leon, a figure whose reputation alone commanded respect and silence. Stern, precise, unyielding, he had presided over some of the most consequential cases in the nation. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the room with a quiet authority. Few dared to meet his gaze without feeling the weight of decades of legal mastery pressing down on them. For many, the courtroom was not just a room. It was a proving ground where he was both arbiter and final word. To challenge him seemed impossible, and yet that impossibility is exactly what Jasmine Crockett was about to confront. Whispers floated through the gallery, barely audible but persistent. Can she really hold her ground? Someone murmured. Another voice, laced with doubt, added, I don't see how she can match his experience. Even among the journalists and seasoned legal observers, skepticism hung like a shadow over Crockett. She was underestimated, quietly dismissed as the underdog in a theater designed for dominance and performance. The tension wasn't just palpable. It was almost tactile, pressing down on every shoulder, every nervous glance, every shallow breath. Crockett, however, seemed unaware of the weight pressing in from all sides. Her posture was calm, measured. Her notes lay neatly before her, but she didn't clutch them as a shield. Instead, they were tools, a foundation for the clarity that would soon overwhelm the room. The audience's doubt created a paradoxical energy, a space where tension and expectation collided, making her every word a potential turning point. Every second that passed added to the suspense, drawing every eye toward her. Whether consciously or subconsciously, The cameras continued to roll. Capturing more than legal procedure, they captured anticipation, the undercurrent of suspense. The collective awareness that something extraordinary could unfold at any moment. Observers knew instinctively that this was a moment that could not be fully understood in real time. Social media feeds would ignite, conversations would spread across states, and viewers who weren't in the room would only hear fragments of what was happening. And those who chose to leave, even for a moment, would miss it entirely, a mistake they would regret for months to come. Judge Leon's presence alone amplified the stakes. His gaze, unwavering and calculating, suggested that he had seen every tactic before, every performance tested. He was untouchable in reputation, seemingly immune to surprise or disruption. For anyone stepping into that arena, the pressure to perform flawlessly was suffocating. And yet, in this room, among the whispers of doubt and the unblinking cameras, Crockett prepared to do more than perform. She was about to challenge the very gravity of expectation itself. Every beat of the courtroom, every subtle movement, every hesitation of the jury, and every gasp from the spectators built toward a single inevitable question. Could the underestimated, quietly resilient figure at the center of it all seize control and shift a room designed to resist change? The answer, though unseen in that moment, would soon become a defining spectacle, and viewers who left the courtroom that day would forever regret missing what came next. Across the courtroom, the opposing counsel sat with a practiced ease exuding a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Years in high-profile cases had taught him how to command attention without speaking, how to fill a room with the weight of reputation alone. His presence was a subtle threat, a reminder that he had survived and even thrived in arenas where many brilliant minds had crumbled. He was the kind of lawyer who didn't just argue, performed projecting authority like armor, every gesture calibrated to intimidate, every smirk calculated to unsettle. He had become a darling of the media, a figure whose every courtroom victory was dissected on television panels, quoted in legal columns, and celebrated in political circles. Stories of him dismantling opposing counsel with surgical precision were told in whispers and brags alike. Opponents often left courtrooms rattled, their confidence eroded by his relentless efficiency and mastery of procedure. To watch him in action was to witness the art of dominance perfected, a blend of intellect, showmanship, and unapologetic self-assurance. When Jasmine Crockett entered this battlefield, whispers ran through the room. Observers noted her determination but doubted her ability to withstand the force of this seasoned adversary. Among the journalists and courtroom regulars, she was referred to quietly as the rookie, the underdog in a game she had only begun to play. Her presence was acknowledged politely, but never seriously considered a threat. A miscalculation that would soon reveal the depth of her resolve. The opposing counsel's demeanor reinforced the assumptions. Smiling confidently, leaning back in his chair, he exuded a casual superiority that bordered on condescension. His eyes scanned the room with the air of someone who had already won before the trial began. Every gesture a flick of a pen, a controlled laugh, a subtle shake of the head, was a reminder of his experience and the power he wielded effortlessly. He had spent years building a reputation that intimidated, and he believed that reputation alone would be enough to diminish Crockett before she even opened her mouth. Yet beneath the surface of his polished arrogance were cracks invisible to the untrained eye. While he relied on past victories and media acclaim, he underestimated the significance of authenticity, of lived experience, of the quiet power that comes from standing firmly in truth. The courtroom had seen brilliance before, but it had rarely seen resilience married to purpose in the way Crockett embodied. Where he wielded ego, she wielded dignity. Where he sought to dominate, she aimed to enlighten. The contrast was striking. On one side, the veteran of countless battles, steeped in strategy and self-regard, projecting invulnerability like a shield. On the other, a figure often dismissed as inexperienced, underestimated for her age and her quiet confidence, yet grounded. In a life shaped by struggle, advocacy, and the relentless pursuit of justice, it was a collision of two forces, one born from power accumulated, the other from power earned through resilience as the trial commenced. Every observer could sense the tension between the two. He began with a practiced flourish, attempting to unsettle her with pointed questions, thinly veiled dismissals, and insinuations masked as civility. The jury, accustomed to seeing novices falter, leaned forward expectantly, anticipating hesitation or misstep. But Crockett's calm, measured responses revealed a composure that seemed to defy expectation. Each carefully chosen word, each deliberate pause, chipped away at the foundation of his confidence, even as he tried to maintain the facade of control. The room, charged with anticipation, became a theater of contrasts. Villain arrogance and hero dignity occupied the same space, their energy bouncing off every wall, every gaze, every subtle breath of the spectators. It was clear to anyone paying attention that this was no ordinary clash. It was a test of substance versus showmanship, of authenticity versus reputation, of quiet strength versus cultivated menace. And yet, despite his experience, despite his media-honed confidence, the opposing counsel could not anticipate the force he was about to encounter. Every tactic he had perfected, every smirk, every insinuation, every attempt to dominate, was about to meet a resistance that could not be intimidated, dismissed, or erased. But arrogance has a way of collapsing, especially when truth walks. Into the room, Jasmine Crockett's path to this courtroom was not paved with privilege or legacy. It was carved from struggle, persistence, and a relentless commitment to justice that began long before she faced Judge Richard Leone, or the seasoned opposition across the aisle. From her earliest days, she had been shaped by challenges that demanded resilience, the kind of challenges that forge a sense of purpose and an unshakable moral compass. Her story was one of sacrifice, of laboring against forces that sought to minimize her voice, and of pushing forward when the odds seemed insurmountable. She grew up navigating spaces where opportunities were limited, where doors were often closed. Before she could even knock, family stories of immigration, of navigating a society that valued lineage over merit, were ever present, teaching her the cost of perseverance and the weight of responsibility. Every setback was a lesson, every doubt cast upon her potential a fuel for determination. These experiences were not just background. They were the foundation of a character that refused to be diminished by skepticism, marginalization, or systemic bias. Crockett's political journey carried its own scars. She had weathered the subtle and overt forms of resistance that greet those who challenge entrenched power. Campaigns where her intentions were questioned, speeches dissected unfairly, and her loyalty doubted tested her resolve. Yet, with every confrontation, she honed her ability to listen deeply, to respond with clarity, and to turn adversity into strategy. Her understanding of systemic inequities was not abstract, it was lived. She knew what it meant to confront barriers, to face prejudice in boardrooms, community meetings, and on the campaign trail, to rise each time stronger and more focused. Beyond politics, Crockett's life was anchored in community service and advocacy. She had spent years working alongside families, immigrants, and marginalized communities, seeing firsthand the struggles they endured and the strength they cultivated. These experiences were not just resume entries. They were formative moments that taught her empathy, patience, and the courage to speak truth to power. Every story she heard, every injustice she witnessed, became a part of her, a silent arsenal of wisdom, resolve, and purpose she carried into every courtroom, every debate. In every decision, her professional ascent was marked not only by skill, but by integrity. She had built a reputation for fairness, for listening, and for valuing substance over spectacle. Colleagues admired her ability to navigate complex cases with precision, yet she remained approachable, grounded in her community, and unafraid to challenge authority when it clashed with principle. Her reputation was quietly formidable, not because of loud declarations, but because those who worked with her knew that beneath her calm exterior was a mind honed for strategy and a heart fueled by justice. The courtroom, in all its grandeur and intimidation, had been a familiar stage. For her preparation, though, never this charged. Every long night reviewing precedent, every early morning meeting with constituents, every debate in which she had stood against entrenched opposition had prepared her for moments like this. Her journey had been one of accumulation of lessons, learned of discipline, cultivated, of empathy sharpened into clarity. Every challenge she had endured added weight to her presence, a gravity that even the most seasoned opposition could not ignore. Her resilience was evident in her demeanor, poised yet passionate, articulate yet approachable, commanding yet humble. She carried the quiet authority of someone who had stared down doubt countless times and emerged unbroken. And beneath that calm was a fire that could ignite a room, a confidence rooted not in ego but in truth and preparation. Where others relied on theatrics or intimidation, Crockett relied on the certainty of her convictions and the depth of her understanding. The contrast with her opponent could not have been starker. Where he wielded reputation and experience as weapons, she wielded, lived truth, authenticity, and a commitment to justice. Where arrogance sought to dominate, her presence invited engagement and demanded respect. It was not merely skill that set her apart, it was the totality of her journey. The life she had lived and the resilience she had cultivated through decades of persistence and service, every whispered doubt, every skeptical glance, every casual dismissal she had endured in her career had been a rehearsal for this moment. The courtroom was more than a legal arena. It was a stage for a culmination. Of her life's lessons, her ability to remain calm, precise, and unshakable was not an act. It was the product of decades of navigating obstacles, overcoming prejudice, and transforming every challenge into clarity. And so, as she prepared to face Judge Leon and the opposition, the audience could not yet see the invisible strength she carried, the lived experience, the resilience, the empathy, the fire within. It was a power honed over years of sacrifice. It was about to manifest in a way that would command the room, and that background prepared her. For the moment, Judge Leon's eyes locked on hers. The courtroom doors swung open once more, and the tension that had been simmering now ignited into a tangible force. Cameras followed every step, capturing the charged atmosphere as spectators leaned forward, anticipation written on every face. The stakes had never been higher. Every glance, every gesture, every whispered exchange carried weight. The room was no longer just a venue for legal argument. It was a stage set for confrontation, a proving ground for intellect, resolve, and composure. Opposing counsel wasted no time. He leaned forward, voice dripping with calculated disdain, his questions sharp and laden with insinuation. Each sentence was designed to unsettle, to bait Crockett into missteps, to expose doubt where none existed. His tone oscillated between mockery and feigned civility, a weapon honed over years of courtroom theater. He had faced countless attorneys before breaking their composure with precision, and he expected this encounter to be no different. But Crockett's presence was a calm hurricane. She met each attack with measured responses, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. There was no rush, no defensiveness, no hint of panic. Every word she chose was deliberate, a subtle assertion of control in a room built for intimidation. Where? The opposing counsel attempted to provoke chaos. She offered clarity. Where he sought to dominate with arrogance, she countered with dignity. The contrast was stark, impossible to ignore. Judge Richard Leon observed silently, his posture immovable, his expression inscrutable. Years of experience had taught him to read the faintest tremor of doubt, the smallest crack in composure, yet Crockett offered none. Her calmness was not naivety. It was armor forged from preparation, resilience, and lived experience. The courtroom, tense and anticipatory, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when the underdog might falter, yet that moment never came. Whispers fluttered through the audience, some of skepticism, some of astonishment. Could someone so underestimated hold her ground against a veteran of legal battles? Some eyes narrowed, anticipating weakness, while others widened, quietly impressed by her poise. Every subtle nod, every deliberate pause, every carefully measured counter-question began to chip away at the carefully constructed confidence of her opponent. His smirks grew tighter, his gestures sharper, but the intended effect, intimidation, was met with unshakable calm. The energy in the room was electric, oscillating between tension and awe. Each exchange heightened the stakes, layering suspense upon suspense. Every subtle victory a point unchallenged, a pause met with silence, a rebuttal delivered with precision, drew the room further into her orbit. She was no longer merely responding. She was shaping the narrative, setting the tempo, commanding attention without a single raised voice. It was clear, even to the casual observer, that this was more than legal argument. It was a battle of wills, a confrontation between entrenched arrogance and quiet conviction. The opposition tried to dominate with experience, reputation, and performance. But Crockett's clarity and composed strength acted like a mirror, reflecting. His tactics back is hollow and ineffective, and yet, despite her calm, audience could sense that the room was on the edge of transformation. Something was building beneath the surface, a moment waiting to erupt, a turning point where control would shift, where expectations would be overturned, where the underestimated challenger would assert an undeniable presence. Then, with the nation watching, she shifted the entire room. Jasmine Crockett inhaled slowly, steadying herself as the courtroom braced for the next volley. The opposing counsel had sharpened his attacks, each word calculated to unsettle, each gesture designed to dominate. Yet in the pause before she spoke, time seemed to slow. A murmur ran through the gallery. Reporters poised their pens. Spectators leaned forward, and even the judge's eyes, keen and analytical, narrowed in expectation. The room was charged, a living entity waiting for the storm to break. Then, she began. Her voice was calm, clear, and deliberate, cutting through the tension like a blade. Every word measured, every phrase carefully constructed, her argument unfolded with the cadence of a master orator. She did not rush, but neither did she falter. Each sentence built upon the last, a crescendo of logic, evidence, and moral clarity that demanded attention. The courtroom shifted imperceptibly, the energy tilting toward her as jurors leaned in, pens hovering, eyes locked. Even the opposing counsel's confident smirk faltered, subtle but undeniable, as he sensed the force of her presence. Crockett's body language reinforced her words. Hands rested lightly on her notes, but her posture was upright, commanding. Subtle gestures punctuated key points, guiding the audience's focus without theatrics. Her pauses were deliberate, allowing crucial ideas to resonate, letting the weight of truth sink in. The gallery responded instinctively. Murmurs of acknowledgement whispered astonishment. The scratch of pens on paper as reporters hurried to capture the moment. Each reaction fed the momentum, an invisible feedback loop amplifying her authority. Her argument was a structured symphony. She began with context, framing the stakes not merely as legal points, but as reflections of broader principles: justice, dignity, and accountability. She highlighted contradictions in her opponent's statements, presenting facts with surgical precision, each point undermining the overconfidence that had defined his approach. She wove her personal insights and professional experiences into the narrative, subtly reminding the room that she spoke not only with preparation but with lived truth. Where arrogance relied on spectacle, her clarity relied on substance. Where intimidation sought to dominate, her composure demanded respect. The jury, initially skeptical, began to shift. Eyes widened, pens scribbled furiously, heads tilted as they followed her logic. The audience sensed the tide turning. Reporters' fingers raced across keyboards, capturing quotations that already felt historic. Whispers of admiration spread quietly, then more audibly, as the contrast between her unshakable dignity and her opponent's rattled demeanor became undeniable. Cameras pivoted instinctively, the lenses capturing the subtle cracks in his confidence. The furrowed brow, the tightening jaw, Judge Leon, the epitome of composure, was visibly caught off guard. His eyebrow arched slightly, a micro-expression betraying the surprise he felt at the precision and depth of her argument. Years of courtroom experience had made him nearly untouchable, yet here, faced with Crockett's deliberate, unwavering delivery, even he could not maintain his detached authority entirely. The room held its collective breath, aware that they were witnessing something rare, not just legal skill, but the quiet, undeniable power of authenticity and preparation meeting arrogance head dash on. As she continued, Crockett layered in rhetorical mastery. She asked questions she did not need to answer aloud, guiding the jury and audience to conclusions they could not ignore. She punctuated critical points with pauses long enough to let the weight sink in, letting the room absorb both the logic and the moral force behind her statements. The opposing counsel attempted interruptions, but they faltered, drowned out by the resonance of her delivery. Each attempt to regain dominance revealed cracks in his facade, while Crockett's measured tone and precise articulation reinforced her control of the narrative. The social validation in the room was immediate. Whispers grew into audible murmurs. Reporters leaned forward, fingers flying over keyboards, capturing every line as if it were destined for history. Spectators gasped in collective realization. This was more than a defense. It was a declaration of principle. Each eye in the courtroom was drawn toward her, each ear attuned to her cadence, each mind weighing the contrast between her integrity and the opposing counsel's crumbling bravado. The gallery became an amplifier of her presence, their reactions, a mirror of the courtroom's acknowledgement that she was commanding the space not with force, but with truth. Her argument reached its apex. She tied legal precedent to broader social impact, moral clarity to procedural necessity. She reframed the narrative, showing that this case was not merely a point of law, but a reflection of values that affected countless lives beyond the courtroom walls. Each word landed with precision, each pause carried weight. Each gesture amplified the sense that the room had shifted irrevocably. The opposing counsel, who had entered confident and unshakable, now searched for footholds that no longer existed. His posture tightened, his gestures became clipped, and even his carefully crafted expressions of control faltered. Crockett's final points were delivered with quiet power. There was no shout, no flourish, only the undeniable authority of substance meeting preparation and lived experience. The courtroom, previously a theater of tension, had transformed into a space where clarity, dignity, and authenticity reigned. Every witness, every juror, every observer felt the gravity of her words, the deliberate force of truth that demanded attention. And then, as she drew the argument to its closing crescendo, the moment crystallized. The air itself seemed to pause. In recognition, every reaction, every gasp, every scribble on paper coalesced into a singular understanding. This was a masterclass in composure and intellect, a collision of experience and authenticity where one would emerge triumphant. And when she delivered her final line, the courtroom froze. For a moment, the courtroom existed in a vacuum. The words had left her lips, yet no sound returned. Every eye was fixed, every mind suspended. The jurors blinked, pens hovering midair. The reporters, who had captured every motion, now sat frozen, fingers poised over their keyboards. Judge Richard Leon, usually so composed, remained in his seat, eyes wide, his usual stoic mask giving way to an expression of rare, undeniable astonishment. The room held its collective breath, as if aware that it had witnessed a turning point, a moment that would ripple far beyond its walls. Then came the first whispers, low at first, threading through the spectators like electricity. Heads turned, murmurs spread, and the silence gave way to a soft, building energy, the initial spark of recognition. This was no ordinary defense. The air vibrated with a newfound tension, not of conflict, but of awe. People instinctively glanced at one another, silently acknowledging what they had all sensed. The balance of power had shifted, quietly, decisively, and irrevocably. Outside the walls of the courtroom, the world waited, and it did not wait long. Social media erupted. In real time, hashtags appeared within seconds, trending globally. Hashtag Crockett Masterclass, hashtag Courtroom Queen, hashtag Judge Amazed. Clips of her speech circulated instantly, each view multiplying the impact. Memes began to form, highlighting her calm authority juxtaposed against the faltering confidence of her opposition. The courtroom's tension had become a viral spectacle, capturing imaginations across states and time zones. Tweets flooded in, retweets piled up, and live commentary painted her as a figure who transcended the procedural confines of law, a symbol of resilience, clarity, and unshakable integrity. Commentators, both legal and political, scrambled to analyze the moment. On television panels, analysts replayed snippets, dissecting her phrasing, her composure, her subtle yet undeniable influence over the room. Celebrities weighed in, applauding her eloquence, comparing her delivery to historic courtroom moments, and framing her as a model of dignity and strength. Supporters, from journalists to community activists, called it a masterclass in dignity, emphasizing that her triumph lay not in theatrics, but in the quiet power of truth, preparation, and lived experience. Critics, once vocal about her inexperience or perceived underdog status, fell silent. Their previous talking points, carefully honed critiques, and dismissive commentary evaporated in the face of the undeniable. Even the most skeptical observers could not argue against the clarity, precision, and moral resonance of her delivery. The opposition's calculated dominance had been appended, and in its place emerged a different kind of authority, one born from authenticity, poise, and unwavering commitment to principle. Inside the courtroom, the ripple effect was immediate and visceral. Judge Leon remained seated, eyes locked, as though cataloging every inflection, every pause, every strategic choice that had led to this moment. The audience, still breathless, allowed themselves small exhalations, shaking heads in disbelief and admiration. Whispers turned into quiet applause, nods of acknowledgement, and subtle gestures of solidarity. The energy was infectious, spreading quietly but powerfully from the jurors to the spectators, from the gallery to the press, until the entire space vibrated with recognition of what had just occurred. The impact was not confined to admiration alone. Conversations ignited across lunch tables, offices, and online forums, all dissecting how a single figure, underestimated and overlooked, had reshaped the dynamics of a room long dominated by reputation and arrogance. Her defense became more than legal argument. It became a symbol, proof that preparation, dignity, authenticity could triumph over expectation and intimidation. Yet even amid the applause, the trending hashtags and the viral clips, there was a subtle understanding among those who had truly witnessed the event. The real victory was not captured in numbers, likes, or social validation. It was not the retweets or the social media frenzy, nor the glowing commentary from celebrities or analysts. The deeper triumph had already taken root in the room itself, in the minds of those present, the hearts of those who could recognize the quiet power of truth, delivered with unwavering conviction. And as the room slowly exhaled, cameras continued to click and record as murmurs filled the hallways outside the courtroom. One thought lingered in the minds of all who had watched. The moment was more than viral sensation, more than a courtroom upset. It was a lesson, a demonstration, testament to what could be achieved when preparation met courage, when authenticity met scrutiny, and when dignity rose above expectation. But the real victory wasn't the trending hashtag. In the quiet that followed the courtroom storm, Jasmine Crockett's presence remained a beacon. The applause, the gasps, the viral clips, all were fleeting echoes of a deeper truth she had illustrated, the battle that had raged within. Those walls was never merely about a legal point, a procedural nuance, or the theatrics of debate. It was about principles far greater than any one case, far larger than any one courtroom. It was a demonstration that dignity, integrity, and preparation could not only withstand arrogance, but dismantle it with a quiet, undeniable authority. Crockett reframed the confrontation not as a personal triumph, but as a universal lesson. Her composure, her careful reasoning, and her unwavering confidence spoke to something fundamental. That substance outlasts showmanship. That truth pierces through pretense, and that moral clarity carries its own weight. She showed that in moments of pressure, in arenas dominated by expectation and ego. It is the calm strength of purpose, rooted in lived experience, that commands respect. The room, the cameras, the world watching, all bore witness to a simple, transformative idea. Dignity always matters more than arrogance. Her defense, carefully layered with logic and lived truth, became more than legal argument. It became a narrative about resilience and identity. Every point she made, every pause, every inflection was a demonstration of the power that comes from preparation and authenticity. She had faced doubt, skepticism, and dismissal countless times in her life and career, yet she had used each challenge as a stepping stone. In doing so, she showed that real influence is not performed. It is earned through persistence, courage, and clarity of vision. The courtroom, still reverberating with the echoes of her words, felt the weight of that lesson. Judge Richard Leon, the embodiment of experience and authority, had witnessed a display that transcended routine judicial procedure. The jurors, once cautious and reserved, now carried the unmistakable impression of her insight and moral clarity. The spectators, reporters, and even the opposition could not ignore the reality she had made tangible in the balance between arrogance and integrity. Substance had prevailed. Her crescendo was not a shout, but a declaration of principle. Her defense wasn't just about a case, it was about America's promise. The words resonated beyond the walls of the courtroom, beyond the screens capturing the moment, beyond social media applause. They spoke to the ideals that bind a society: justice tempered by fairness, courage reinforced by empathy, resilience shaped by lived experience. It was a reminder that the law, at its best, reflects the values of the people it serves, a society where truth, equity, and dignity must always rise above ego, pretense, and intimidation. And for the audience who had been there, who had followed, every exchange, every measured rebuttal, every pause pregnant with significance, there was a lingering emotional clarity. Goosebumps rose as they recognized what had occurred. A living demonstration that values are not abstract, that courage is not performative, and that resilience can overturn expectation in the quietest, most powerful ways. It was a moral lesson, writ large, a validation for anyone who had ever felt underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked. In the aftermath, the courtroom's silence held meaning. It was no longer simply the hush of awe or the pause before commentary. It was a space for reflection, a shared acknowledgement that moments like these, where preparation, integrity, and dignity converge, define not just outcomes, but legacies. Her triumph was a testament to what could be accomplished when authenticity met scrutiny, when courage met challenge, and when truth was allowed to speak for itself. Jasmine Crockett had not just won an argument. She had illuminated a universal principle that in the face of arrogance, in the presence of doubt, dignity and truth prevail. And as the world absorbed the magnitude of what had occurred, the lesson settled deep. Justice, resilience, and integrity are not abstract ideals. They are the foundation on which real power is built. The courtroom freeze frame returns to our minds. Jasmine Crockett mid-sentence. Every eye fixed on her, every breath held in suspended anticipation. That moment, captured in stillness yet alive with intensity, defined the day. That high-profile legal battle had transformed into a stage for something far greater, a demonstration of courage, clarity, and the unassailable power of dignity. Even Judge Richard Leon had no choice but to respect what he'd witnessed. The silence that followed was not just shock. It was acknowledgement of an undeniable truth, a moment that transcended procedure and echoed into history. Across the gallery, from jurors to spectators, from reporters to social media audiences watching in real time, the message was clear. Substance, integrity, and lived experience can overturn expectation. Crockett's composure, her razor-sharp reasoning, and her quiet confidence reminded everyone that real power does not demand attention. It commands respect naturally. It was a lesson for all who had underestimated her, a validation for anyone who had ever been dismissed or overlooked. And now, this moment is yours to witness, to share, and to carry forward. If you believe dignity must always rise above arrogance, if you believe preparation, authenticity, and truth hold more weight than spectacle, then join the movement. Share this moment with someone who needs inspiration. Subscribe to be part of a community that celebrates courage. Carry forward the lesson that even in the most intimidating arenas, integrity can transform the room. Jasmine Crockett did more than defend a case. She defended what it means to stand tall in the face of doubt, to lead with purpose, and to prove that dignity is the ultimate power. Let this moment be a reminder, a call, and an inspiration. The courtroom may have held its breath that day, but the impact of her words will resonate far beyond these walls.